Hello，你好，欢迎回来。Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger. You may hear some running water in the background, kittens taking a shower. So, not sure if that sound is going to carry. Use your imagination. We are not going to show any X-rated contents. Uh, anyway, we are back with our Wisdom Wednesday on September 6th, 2023. I must say, like, my energy level is really, really low right now because I've had a couple of nights of really lousy sleep. And yeah, nothing bad, nothing like I wasn't having like insomnia because of the depression or anything like that. Uh, the night before, last night, just one of those nights that toss and turn. Maybe I had too much coffee. Actually, that's totally possible. Um, and yesterday I actually went to bed expecting to get some good sleep, and then halfway through the night I felt something crawling on me. And this, long story short, I had to get up and kill a creepy crawly, and that uh, was so disturbing and disgusting that I ended up couldn't go back to sleep. Now, this is to say that due to my low energy level and thank you and flagging concentration, if I make any mistake, trip over my own words today, then please forgive me. After all, we are all human. We make mistakes. Now, it is okay for us to make mistakes, but what happened when one of those ancient Chinese, oh so wise and mighty emperors made mistake? What happened then? Well, sadly to say, uh, most of the time, the emperors, they themselves, would not acknowledge their mistake. Most of the time, if you even dare to point out the emperor's mistake, then it can be viewed as treason, and you might get your entire family executed. So there were a lot of not so nice emperors that even though when they said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing, they just flat out refuse to acknowledge it, and no one can do anything about that. Luckily, that was not all of them, because there has been a set number of uh, good, merciful, really wise emperors throughout uh, thousands of years of history, and they did have a set uh, way or so a set uh, a number of things they could do to show that they truly regret their mistakes. And today we are going to uh, talk about that a little bit. Perhaps the most common way that emperors would acknowledge their faults or mistakes, especially when said faults or mistakes create enough of a disturbance, was by the way of a royal decree. They would publicize a royal letter, and this thing was called 自学照. Now, the 自学照, um, basically, if we want to do a quick translation, is a royal decree that tells the entire world, "Hi, I'm the emperor, and sorry, I messed up. I will try to do better. Please forgive me." Okay, so that is for a lot of good emperors, that is the way they'll do. It's like a letter of uh, regret, self-recrimination, apology, a letter of apology to the kingdom. The first such royal decree was made by none other than Han Wudi, the emperor of the Han Dynasty, over 2,000 years ago, about 2,300, 2,200 years ago. Um, Han Wudi was a great emperor when he was younger. However, when he got old, he started to kind of lose his mind a little bit, and he was so scared of getting old and die that he got into believing in witchcraft and magic and potions and all that stuff. As a result, he caused a lot of chaos and a lot of unrest in the kingdom. Uh, and that actually cost him the life of his wife and his son. So the queen and the prince both died as a result of that. Finally, Han Wudi, the emperor, uh, came to his senses and realized how ridiculous he has been trying to find the fountain of youth. And he realized how messed up the kingdom was, how he had almost ruined his own kingdom. He publicized the first uh, letter of apology, royal letter of apology in Chinese history. Now, the last royal letter of apology, ironically, was publicized by uh, Emperor Yuan Shikai. Now, a lot of people don't know who Yuan Shikai was. There's a sad little twist there. After the after the Chinese Democrats overthrew the imperial system, they tried to vote for the first president in China, the first Chinese president. So this was back in 1912. Um, Ironically, the guy they put into to be president was a guy named Yuan Shikai. He was one of the military generals and one of the chief advisors, chief leaders of the rebellion that threw out the imperial system. But as soon as he was put in power, what did he do? Yuan Shikai installed himself as a new emperor of China. So it's like, oh, great, guys, we just spent the last God knows how many years, a lot of us have died, trying to end imperial system. But that's okay. Now that I am the president, I don't want to be president. I want to be emperor. So call me Emperor Yuan Shikai. Right. Needless to say, he, the other people in the Democratic Party wouldn't have that. So they all got together and uh, started uh, basically punishing Yuan Shikai and his people through financial means, and they were calling in the military to get him thrown out of office. So Yuan Shikai actually, even though he made himself the emperor, unofficially the last emperor of China. He was only there for 80 days before they threw him out of office, and then he lived another 3 months before dying of some disease. Uh, and when he was thrown out of office, he published he published the last royal letter of apology uh, ever recorded in Chinese history. Uh, and basically, the letter said, "Hi, I am Yuan Shikai, your last emperor. I was meant to be president, but I wanted to be emperor instead. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. It was a lapse in judgment. Please forgive me. I messed up." Between Han Wudi and Yuan Shikai, the first and the last royal letter of apology, there was a period of over 2,000 years. And during this time, there were almost 300 royal letters of apology penned and inked and decreed by over 60 different emperors through different times. So this way of apologizing to the people was definitely popular and one of the most official ways you're going to get an emperor to apologize for anything. Other than the aforementioned royal letter of apology, some emperors and leaders also came up with other ways of uh, making up for their mistakes. And we're going to look at some of these more um, interesting and weird examples. First, let's go back to the time of the Three Kingdoms, the romance of the Three Kingdoms. This went back to about year 140, year 150. Uh, the warlord Cao Cao was leading his troop through the countryside to go fight one of his rivals. And because Cao Cao wanted to get the civilians to side with him, so he decreed that no one in his military would ride their horses through a farmer's field. If a horse was to harm any, even a blade of grass in a farmer's field, then the person who rode that horse would be executed on the spot. So Cao Cao was leading his troop through the countryside, the farmland on both sides, and they were uh, making really good time. When suddenly, out of nowhere, a bird flew out of a tree and spooked Cao Cao's horse, and Cao Cao couldn't get his horse under control in time, and his horse just bolted into a farm, a field, and trampled all the newly planted seeds and sprouts and all that good stuff that the farmers were working on. Needless to say, Cao Cao was very embarrassed because here he was, he's a leader, and he made the rule. He said, if any of you, your horse, if they harm the crop in the field, even a blade of grass, and you have to be executed. Well, now what's he going to do? Well, he was so embarrassed that he pulled out his sword and was going to kill himself on the spot. Uh, Now, most of us believe that he was just faking it. Like, I don't think he was very sincere about that. But anyway, he pulled out his sword because, I mean, honestly, if you want to pull out your sword and kill yourself, if you really mean it, then no one can stop you. Okay? Especially when you're on horseback. Like everyone, even people close to you, would be too far away to stop you. So this is why a lot of us who read history believe Cao Cao was just faking. Because if he really meant to kill himself, then he would have been dead. So obviously he made a big show of pulling out his sword and then I broke the law and I must pay for it. And I'm now going to kill myself. Please do not stop me. Please do not stop me. Will somebody stop me? Yeah, something like that, right? Like, if he just pulled out his sword and killed himself, then that would be it. That would be the end of the story. But he didn't. He obviously pulled out his sword and made a big show of it. Well, and lucky for him, all his advisors and best generals, obviously they couldn't sit back and just watch him kill himself. So after they heard his uh, big talk, they jumped in and tried to grab his wrist and wrestle his sword from him. And you're our warlord, you're our king. Like you can't kill yourself. Like, well, what are we don't going to do? We can't be without a leader. And Cao Cao said, well, but I broke my own rule. If I break my rule and nothing happened to me, then people won't take my word seriously. So in the end, they compromised by Cao Cao cutting off a big chunk of his hair and hanging that chunk of hair on their banner so everybody could see it. And the cutting off of the hair was supposed to symbolize him getting his head chopped off, and they called it a day. Now, from our point of view today, that sounds like such a cop out, right? Like, what the heck? You just cut off your hair and that's okay? Well, back then, that's quite a big deal, especially for a leader, a king like Cao Cao. Uh, when everybody could see that he's missing a chunk of hair. That's like walking around without pants. The shame would be ridiculous. So yes, it's nowhere as bad as chopping off his head, but it's not trivial like a lot of us would think today either. The next one I'll tell you about is the first emperor of the Song Dynasty. Song Dynasty was about um, 1,000 years, 1,200 years ago, I believe. And so the first emperor of the Song Dynasty came to the throne uh, due to rebellion. He committed treason and killing the emperor that he was serving ended the previous dynasty. So he took over and created the Song Dynasty. So uh, the first emperor of Song Dynasty, his name is Zhao Kuang-yin. Now, Zhao Kuang-yin had four sworn brothers that he was best of best friends. They were sworn brothers. But as soon as he became the emperor, the first emperor, uh, the original agreement was he would be emperor for so many years, and then his next brother would be emperor for so many years, and then the next brother in line would get to be emperor for so many years. But that was when they were plotting the rebellion. After they succeeded, after Zhao Kuang-yin became the first emperor of Song Dynasty, he decided, hey, now I'm the emperor. I don't want to give it to my brother. I like being emperor. So, due to a series of events and plots, he got his some of his brothers murdered, and some of his brothers were banished from the kingdom, and he kept the throne for himself. Now, like I mentioned, before he became the emperor, he was a military general serving the previous emperor, and so were his sworn brothers. Um, so while Zhao Guangyin was so busy murdering his brothers and getting them out of the way so they wouldn't uh, try to take the throne away from him, he neglected the fact that not only his brothers were great generals, his second brother, the second sworn brother, the one that he murdered, that brother, his wife, was a great military leader and warrior. So after her husband got murdered by Zhao Kuang-yin, the new emperor, this sister-in-law, we'll just call him Zhao Kuang-yin's sister-in-law, put together a huge army and put the palace, royal palace, under siege, wanting to avenge her husband and kill the emperor. Long story short, the emperor and her they negotiated, and finally, after promising her tons and tons of silver and gold uh, and all kind of royal perks, she agreed that she will not murder Zhao Guangyin, the emperor, and she will take her army home. But she said to Zhao Guangyin, the emperor, she said, well, it's good that you will compensate us, but when I called this army together, I promised these men that I will personally kill the person who murdered my husband. So even though I agree not to kill you now, you need to find me a way to satisfy my army, because I promised them I would kill you myself. So Zhao Guanyin like, well, I don't know what to tell you. Like, sister, I already promised you gold and silver and a royal pardon and land and wealth and all that stuff. What else can I do? And so his sister-in-law said, tell you what, take off your clothes, take off your royal robe, and I'm going to stab it. I'm going to take a sword and stab it several hundred times, and that will symbolize me murdering you, and we'll call it a day. So, right there in front of everybody, Zhao Guanyin, the emperor, stripped down to his underwear, uh, handed his royal robe over to his sister-in-law so she could stab it uh, and rip it apart with her sword, just to show her men that, okay, I did my part. I told you guys I would avenge my husband, and I just did. Look, this is the royal robe, and I just cut it up with my sword. So this was the second instance of the emperor making up for their faults or mistake in kind of a WTF fashion. Last but not least, we go back to uh, about 1650, 1670, uh, during the last dynasty in Chinese history, the Qing dynasty, um, during the reign of Emperor Qianlong. Uh, Emperor Qianlong is said to be a very good emperor when he was there, but obviously he was not immune to making mistakes too. In fact, one of the things that he did that was a bit messed up was Emperor Qianlong was trying to repair one of his royal castles because it burned down, and he had to rebuild the castle. Now, during the rebuilding of the castle, he realized that they were short on the high quality timbers needed to build the palace, the castle. So what did he do? He went and tore down the royal vaults that were housing the, uh, the bones of the ancestors. He he went and tore down their resting place to because all those royal vaults were built using the best quality material. So he tore them down, used those timbers to build his new castle. Well, that act angered so many of his subjects that they got together and told the emperor how much of a piece of uh, whatever you want to call him, uh, how much of an a-hole he was for doing that. How dare you disturb the ancestors' resting place just because you want to build a new castle? How could you? And in the end, the emperor was so ashamed of himself and he was badgered from all sides by his royal subjects that he said, okay, fine, like, what do you want to do about it? You want to kill me? Go ahead, kill me. Like, I already tore it down. I already built a new castle. What do you want to do? What do you guys want to do? And finally, one of his subjects said, well, the punishment decreed by law for violating someone else's resting place is either immediate execution or exile. So obviously we can't kill you and we can't really exile you. So why don't you go on a trip? Why don't your highness go on a trip? And while you're on this trip, you will wear this uh, this undergarment made out of steel mesh. This will symbolize that you are being exiled, and the steel mesh will symbolize the chain and shackle that a person in exile have to wear. And you have to stay away from the capital city for 3 months before coming back. And we'll call that a day. So Qianlong Emperor said, okay, fine. And so he did. He decided to take a hunting trip away from the capital city. And during this trip, he wore an undergarment made of steel mesh. And later, that kind of undergarment actually became super popular as a fashion item in high society in China. So now that we know, yes, emperors definitely did mess up, and a lot of them did some really messed up things. And if they were good emperors, they did make an attempt to make up for the mistakes they made. Some of the times, the ways they did this was a bit dismissive, a bit WTF, but hey, better than nothing, right?